Today on the Modern Motherhood Podcast from AllMomDoes, I'll be your host, Julie Lyles Carr. And what if you thought you were headed for a career in basketball? That was your love. That's what you wanted to do. And then all of a sudden, God called you to something completely different. How do you make the jump from basketball all the way to one of the most soulful folk singers around in the Christian genre? That's right. Today, we have the gorgeous JJ Heller. JJ, thanks so much for being with us today.
Matt, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. And you have two little girls. You're in Nashville, Tennessee. And how long have you been living there?
Well, this is actually our second round in Nashville. My husband and I lived in Phoenix right after we got married. And then a couple years in, we moved to Nashville trying to pursue our musical career. And the first time around felt pretty lonely, to be honest. Like it wasn't what we were expecting. And we had our first baby here and then just realized, okay, all the grandparents' support is back out west. And we are here with our baby feeling lonely and out of place. Why don't we just move back? And so we moved back to Phoenix to be closer to grandparents. And then our career took a really unexpected turn. And all of a sudden we were doing bus tours out of Nashville. And so after a few years, we decided, okay, if we want to spend more time with our kids, then we need to move back to Nashville. And so we moved back about 3.5 years ago. And this experience this time around has been such a gift, just life-giving and wonderful. And I wasn't expecting that. And so God is really good.
How's it been raising kids away from the grandparents? We've had the experience both ways ourselves, where we lived for quite a few years when some of our oldest kids were younger, that we had grandparents really, really close and at all of the school plays and all of the things. And then we made a move. The Lord moved us to an area where we don't have extended family, and it's had its own set of challenges and blessings. How's it been for y'all this go around, moving away from that supportive extended family?
Yeah, well, when we lived in Phoenix, my husband's parents lived there and my parents lived in California. And then when we told my in-laws that we were moving back to Tennessee, they were so sad.
Oh.
But fortunately, my sister-in-law had a baby shortly after that, and they live in Phoenix too. And so I think that helped ease the pain a little bit. There was still a grandkid there. And my parents actually decided to move to Tennessee because I think grandchildren have a sort of a gravitational pull.
Their own pull, yeah.
So my parents now live about 40 minutes south of where we are, and it's been such a blessing. We get to see them about every week and a half or so, except recently we've been seeing them every week because my daughter Nora has been playing basketball, and so they'll make the drive out and we'll see them at Nora's 30-minute long basketball games.
So speaking of basketball, that's actually a topic I wanted to touch on. You started out with a big dream of playing basketball. That was the dream, not music. So talk to us about that and what happened and how God interrupted what you thought was the dream of being in sports, and you ended up in a really different lane.
Yeah, I never in a million years thought that I would be a singer-songwriter for my job. I always liked singing as a kid, and I took piano lessons, and I was in choirs and stuff, but I was more focused on sports. My family was really sports-oriented, and so when I got to high school, I was in a vocal ensemble, but I never got very many solos. And so I just thought, okay, I like singing, but maybe I'm not that great at it, but I'm really good at sports, so that'll be my thing. And so in high school, I played volleyball, basketball, and softball. But basketball was my favorite, and it always had been. And my dream was to play basketball in college. And fortunately for me, my dad was a basketball coach. And so he would work with me, and every Sunday night, he would take me to the gym at the school, and he would rebound for me, and I would just shoot over and over. And I got really good at shooting 3-pointers. So by the end of my senior year of high school, I was voted the most valuable player in my league, which got me excited because it meant that I would be able to play basketball in college. This dream and this goal that I had been working towards my whole childhood. So I went and I thought maybe if I work hard enough in college that maybe by the end of my college career, I can be the MVP of my whole college league. And so as the season was progressing, I was realizing that this dream was not going to happen because I don't know what changed, but all of a sudden I could not make a basket if my life depended on it. And it felt like somehow God was sabotaging my basketball skills. And I was so upset and frustrated. And I looked at the stats at the end of the year, and I had the worst shooting percentage on my whole team, which was just heartbreaking. And I decided that I wasn't going to play again the next year. And then I was faced with this question of, who am I if I'm not an athlete? And what do I do with my time if I'm not practicing or playing? And it was just this big life redefining moment for me. And so I ended up going on a missions trip that following summer through my college. We went to Kenya for 6 weeks, and lots of life-changing things happened on that trip. But one of those things was I learned how to play the guitar, and I wrote my first song with some friends on the trip. And it was the very beginning of a new dream that God wanted to plant in my heart. And looking back now, I'm so glad that the plans that I had for my life didn't happen. Because if I was really successful at basketball my freshman year, then maybe I still would have gone on that missions trip, and maybe I still would have written a song, but I wouldn't have given songwriting a second thought, because I would have thought, I'm an athlete. This is what I'm good at. This is what I'm doing. And so I'm so thankful that I was terrible at basketball my freshman year, because it made room in my heart for God to do something bigger than I had ever even imagined.
I think it's really amazing, those kind of stories, because, we have those people who have been searching for their thing, or they keep staying in the lane and they work really hard. And we love those stories, oh, Cinderella's story, she stayed at it. She kept going. Yes, her stats weren't what they wanted them to be, but she kept shooting and kept practicing. Sometimes there's a huge amount of wisdom in knowing when God is saying, I have a different path. And it's not one that we always like to write up. It's not the one that honors all the hard work and desire we can put into something, but it's one that can be really, really profound. How are you going to reduce that story down for your girls? Like, what's the nugget that you want them to take from that life experience?
Well, I think it's always easy to see the plan when you're looking back at it.
Right.
At that moment, it didn't feel like, this is the new dream that God has planted. And it's going to be great because I'm going to build my whole career off of this moment. It felt more like death and grieving. And I think that's just kind of how life goes. And the important thing is to just keep taking those steps forward and trusting that God is going to provide every day. Most of the time, he doesn't give us the 30,000 foot view, but he gives us enough for each day, like manna in the desert. And that kind of metaphor has been so helpful to me in lots of different aspects of my life. Just being able to trust with my heart that even if I can't see what God is doing, I can still trust who he is and know that he is faithful and he is good and he's never going to leave me.
Even if you can't make a 3-pointer anymore. Well, it seems like in the arts, anything from music to writing to acting, it kind of comes built in with a lot of rejection, which can lead to dejection. So even though God changed your course and put you in a lane for music, it didn't mean that you weren't going to still feel times of failure. And you talked about that initial move to Nashville, just not feeling like it was clicking with all the things you were trying to do. So what has your path been like, and how do you keep yourself encouraged in the Lord? I look at some of the writing of King David, a fellow musician, and he definitely has times where he's like rejected and dejected. So in something that is as volatile as music, how do you stay in a lane where you feel encouraged?
I feel really blessed to be in this with my husband, who plays guitar with me on stage, and we songwrite and he manages. And so it's very much a team effort. And so for us, we get to bounce ideas off of each other, and we get to keep each other humble when we need to, and we can encourage each other when we need that as well. And I think even recently I've just really found the value in not comparing. And I know that's something that comes up a lot for women. It's just such a temptation to look at somebody else's life and to think, oh, I'm never going to be that good, or my hair is never going to look that great, or, but we don't know the whole story. And beyond that, God didn't make me to be her. He made me to be me with a special grouping of gifts and talents, just like he's made each person unique to serve their unique purpose. And if we were all exactly the same, then that would be so boring. And so I've just really tried to focus on what you were saying, like staying in my lane, figuring out, okay, how has God uniquely gifted me? And what is it that I can say that maybe is a different perspective? Like I don't have to try to be Francesca Battistelli or Natalie Grant, because Natalie Grant is Natalie Grant. I can be myself and write songs from my heart, from my experience, and maybe reach somebody who is more similar to me, and to offer those gifts, whether they're really big gifts or really small gifts, to say, like, Lord, you can have all of me, and I'm going to serve you with what I have, whether it makes a huge impact that I can see, or maybe something small that I never see.
We'll be back to this conversation about music, creativity, when God puts a little bit different call on your life, with JJ Heller here in just a bit. But first, I want to make sure you know about a community that is just for you, a gathering of moms where you can share your heart, get great resources, find support. That's right, I'm talking about MOPS. For over 40 years, MOPS has been inviting women into community through the commonality of motherhood, building friendships, and earning the opportunity to share Jesus with them, maybe for the first time. MOPS believes that all moms are world influencers and exists to encourage and equip all moms everywhere to live their best lives. Check out mops.org to find a local gathering in your neighborhood. And now back to our conversation with JJ Heller. You say something that I think is really powerful. I mean, for you, your music is ministry. It's something that you're giving back to the Lord. You're ministering directly to Him. You're ministering directly to others. And yet there's a whole business to music too. I mean, there's all of the making sure you're in the social medias and you're getting your music out there where people can find it. And the music industry has changed so much in the last few years, where, we were going from CDs to digital download, and now all of a sudden we're having this renaissance of vinyl again, and trying to keep, on top of all of those different things. And so how do you stay up to date on the business perspective of it while at the same time retaining the purity of the ministry of it? Because I know a lot of women out there who are wanting to do things that serve and that minister well, but the business side can seem to sort of complex that entire conversation.
Right. Well, with music, things have transitioned quite a bit since I started. I mean, when Dave and I started playing music full time, MySpace was a thing.
Right, right.
And that was a really helpful tool. And I was so sad when people were switching over to Facebook, because on MySpace, I don't know if you remember this, but when you went to somebody's page, they had an automatic song that would play.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's how we gained a lot of fans early on, is people would put our song on there. And it was like the most mind-blowing thing when we started playing shows and people would come up to us afterward and say, I found you on MySpace. And it was like, what? But then, people moved away from MySpace and it became Facebook, and things are always transitioning. And so I think I'm learning that the most important thing is to be flexible and not try to like have a stranglehold on, no, this is the way it's always been and I'm going to make it work. And I think, it's kind of a good metaphor for life as well. Like things happen that maybe we wouldn't choose, but sometimes there's beauty to be found in those differences, and we kind of have to grow along with it. And one other thing that's been really helpful is my husband and I are independent artists, meaning we don't work with a record label. Everything is just kind of self-funded, and it's like we own our own small business. And because our operation is so small, if we need to pivot and try something new, we can do that without a big risk and without having the weight of, okay, there are 15 people whose salaries depend on our success. So to just have that freedom has been amazing. And we have a really unique story because about, I think, maybe 8 years into our career, a girl decided to use one of our songs called Your Hands for her audition on the show So You Think You Can Dance. And a man who worked at a Christian radio station in Texas watched the show, played our song on the air the next morning, and one thing led to another, and all of a sudden my song was like playing all across the country, and then it was on the Billboard charts, and it was just insane. Something that I never thought would happen. And so we followed that up with like the next year with another song called What Love Really Means, and that did really well on the radio. But since then, gosh, that was probably like 7 or 8 years ago, I haven't really had a big song on the radio. When things were going really well with our business, we just put a bunch of money away. We were just really conservative with it. And so now we're in a place where I don't feel the pressure I have to make a big hit song or else we're just going to have to call it quits. There's this freedom of just like seeking the Lord and asking, okay, what do I need to write about? And what will resonate with these women who I feel like I'm called to serve? And knowing that even if it serves like a handful or like a few hundred, then that I can still call that success, and I can still keep moving forward and creating music. And it's just been, it's such a gift to me. And I feel like the way that it all happened was just miraculous. And I didn't plan for it. And yet it just felt like a total gift from the Lord. And so just since then, Dave and I have been trying to really steward that gift well, and do what we can to make good business choices and to also make good creative choices. And some days it feels like a lot of pressure, but at the same time, it's also such a gift to be able to speak into the lives of women. I don't think I really recognize the weight of it most times, but man, it's so humbling, and I don't know why he chose me to do that. But I feel so honored, whether it's through social media or through telling stories on stage or singing. It's just amazing, and I feel just so blessed.
Well, and you're stewarding it so well. You alluded to the fact that you and your husband, Dave, you work together. He's in the band. And I was recently interviewing Anita Renfro. She and her husband, John, work together. He's her manager. And she said that they've come up with this strategy for working together, that the hour before they get to the airport, that's kind of like you can't point fingers about how you behave that hour before you go to the airport, and then the hour before the show. Like it's just a free zone, and we don't hold things against each other and what we say and what we do. So what are some things you've learned from working with your spouse? Because, it's interesting in today's world. I encounter a lot of women because of the democratization of the music industry and the writing industry and the things that you can do at home and online business platforms and all of those things, that it may be that we're engaging more with our spouses in a work platform. So what are some things you and Dave have learned about marriage that even maybe whether you work together or not are just great, solid observations about how to make marriage work?
Yeah. Well, I love that, by the way. I'm going to adopt that 1 hour rule. Especially me. Maybe not for Dave. Dave is, he is so even-tempered, And I thought I was unemotional until I met Dave, but he takes it like to a whole new level.
He's Vulcan. Is that what you're saying? He's Vulcan.
Yeah. Yes. So I'm normally the one who needs to like watch my attitude because I'll get nervous and I'll get all amped up, and just, have a short temper. And, but one thing for us that's so important is to laugh a lot. And so we're just silly with each other. And I think that it's hard to find space for that, especially if you have little kids at home where you just feel like you're surviving. At the same time, like, it's almost even more important that you find time to just have a good time with your spouse instead of just like checking off all the things on the to-do list. So if that's like scheduling a date night, or I don't know, like even feeding the kids a meal sometimes and putting them to bed and then eating with your spouse later and talking about their day. Something else that's been really helpful for our marriage too is to just be really honest with each other and not hold things inside. And it's been so life-giving, and it's hard to have those conversations sometimes, but then once we like kind of buckle down and do it, then we feel so much better about the scenario moving forward. And learning how to forgive is good. Like, he and I have been doing a lot of work at that recently, and just realizing, okay, what does it mean to apologize? It's not normally enough to just say, sorry, I did this. We're learning to say, so how did it make you feel when I did this? And then you can actually hear your spouse and hear from their perspective. Because I think the mistake that I make most of the time is I think that my husband is like me. So that language allows him to explain, well, what I was trying to do or what I was trying to communicate was this. And most of the time he tells me that and I'm like, really? Because that's not what I got from it at all. And then I can apologize in a way that's actually meaningful instead of just saying, well, sorry if your feelings were hurt when I did that. And it's interesting because as we've been learning those skills for our own marriage, we've been trying to teach our girls as well when they have conflict with each other. Instead of just saying, like, tell your sister sorry, we try to have them have that conversation. And like Lucy will ask Nora, how did it make you feel when I didn't let you take a turn? And then Nora,
that's terrific. That's terrific.
Well, it made me feel sad. And then Lucy can say, well, I'm sorry it made you sad. I'll try to do something different in like the next time. And then they're relating on an emotional level rather than like, okay, the right thing is to do to say sorry. So we'll check that off the list and move on. And humans are so much more nuanced than that.
Right.
But all that to say, working with a spouse is not easy. And I don't think it's for everyone, actually. But Dave and I, we were really great friends before we even started dating. And so I think that helped build a good foundation for us, which is so important because we travel together, we're on stage together, we work at home together. And we go through seasons where sometimes it's really easy to be together and sometimes it's a little harder. But man, God has been so gracious to us. And next month we will celebrate our 15th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations. That's awesome. My husband, Mike, and I, we don't actually work together. He works in finance. I'm in ministry and in writing and speaking. And it's interesting, though, we have to be very intentional that even though we don't work together, that we're not always just talking about work. I mean, when we come down to the end of the day and we circle up at home, and it's amazing how frequently our conversations tend to work. And so we just have to be really intentional in that way. Now, as moms, why do you think we should explore our dreams and our creativity and our gifts? Because I know there are some moms who almost feel a sense of guilt that if they're not completely 100% focused on their children all the time, then maybe somehow they're doing a discredit to their kids. How do you keep engaging in that creative space, and how do you think it benefits your girls?
Well, I think as moms, we all want to represent the character of Christ, to be Christ-like and to like reflect our God. And he's creative. I mean, he is the creator of the universe. And so I feel like he's put that creativity in each of us. And so if we want to represent who God is to our children, that is such an important aspect of the character of who God is. And it's an easy one to push to the side because it doesn't feel really productive. You're not feeding somebody, you're not cleaning. And yet I think it's so important for our overall spiritual and mental health. And it doesn't mean we need to have our own Etsy store or we need to make money off of the things that we make. I think sometimes it just means if you feel like painting, then set aside 10 minutes to paint or paint with your kids. Our creative endeavors don't need to make us money in order to provide value to both ourselves and our children. And there's something also about being creative that involves a little bit of inherent risk, like you're kind of putting yourself out.
Right.
Whether you're singing or dancing, it's just like, I'm going to make this thing and you might like it or you might not. And I think it's such a beautiful way to make an example to our kids of just being able to go after something that you want to do without fear of failure. And to just say, I'm going to try this because it's in my soul to do this. And it might work out and it might not, but that's okay. Like the important thing is to go after it.
It's beautiful. And, you know, your particular love and lane that God took you from 3-pointers to music. Why do you think God created us to have such a need for music? I mean, it's amazing, even when I just look at neuroscience, what music does to the brain. Clearly, God designed us for this incredible love of it. Why do you think music speaks to us in ways that other creative mediums maybe don't tap into in the same way? That those other creative mediums may also touch parts of us, but music in particular, what do you see happen when you're up there ministering in this way through music?
Yeah, I think that the Lord just knew that humans are prone to just sit in their logic, and music has a way of tapping into our emotion, whether we want it to or not. And it just has a way of speaking to our hearts, and it moves past those walls. And it's been so amazing, even during concerts, to watch people listening to songs and start crying, and just like, I could see that they feel surprised, like, why am I crying right now? And yet that's just what's so beautiful about music, is because I think that it's so healthy for us to get those emotions out and to feel things. And for me, sometimes writing songs is like therapy. And I don't know how I feel until I write a song about it. And then sometimes I'll write a song and then I'll be singing it months later, like from stage, and the Lord will put something in my mind, and all of a sudden the song will take on a completely new meaning. And I think there's just something kind of miraculous about music that's mysterious and just really wonderful. And so even when I'm songwriting, sometimes it's like the Lord takes me on a journey that I don't even know where it's headed. Like my song, What Love Really Means, for example, people ask me where the inspiration of that song came from. And that song I wrote probably quicker than any other song that I've ever written. It just kind of flowed out onto the page, and it didn't have a certain inspiration. It just came out. And I love that the Lord did it that way, because it makes me realize that I can't really take credit for it. It was almost like it's his song that he wanted to write, and I get to be the one who gets to sing it and share it with people.
It sounds like your creative process for each of your pieces is a little bit different each time, that there's not really okay, we're going to go on this sabbatical for 3 days at this cabin, and I'm going to come out the other side of it with an album. I mean, it sounds like it's a really just staying in an attitude of listening almost. Is that a fair way to describe it?
Yes and no. I feel like songwriting is this combination of mystery and also intentionality, especially since I've had kids. I don't have the luxury of just sitting down when I feel inspired. because they still they need dinner, and I can't stay up super late because they still wake up at the same time in the morning. So I keep a running list on my phone now. If I hear something that's inspiring, whether it's a word or a phrase or something from a sermon or a poem or just on a billboard, I will keep a running list on my phone so that when I have time to sit down with my guitar, I can look at my list and see, okay, what is resonating with me? And sometimes a few of those ideas will kind of work together, and then a song will come out of that.
That's beautiful. Well, you've got an upcoming event that our listeners in British Columbia, Canada, and in the Seattle, Washington area, we want to make sure that they know about. It's called Evening at the Well. What's the evening about, and what do you hope women gain from being part of that event?
I love this event so much. It's my favorite thing I do all year. I love playing for women, and as a mom, I know how many things that I'm juggling. And as women, how many things we juggle. Most of us just push ourselves to the limit and at the same time still feel like we're not doing enough. And so this is a night that's designed to invite women to come and sit still. My friend Mandy and I just want to sing and speak blessing over them and remind them that they are loved and that they're not alone and that they have a story to tell. It's just my way of cheering these women on, to make them laugh and maybe make them cry, and just remind all of us that we're not in competition with one another. We're all on the same team. And even though this sounds like maybe cliche and trite, but that God loves us so much. And he delights in all of us. And so that's what this night is about. We're not asking the women to do anything. We just want to love them and cheer for them.
And that's Mandy Arriota, who is the president of MOPS. So she obviously also has a deep, compassion and appreciation, particularly for those moms, that the idea of going and sitting still and sitting over people, just loving you and speaking blessing over you is so huge. I've loved this time getting to talk with J.J. Heller, one of the really inspirational voices in Christian music today. And hey, if you are in the Surrey, British Columbia, Canada area or in the Seattle, Washington area, we actually have a couple of events coming up with J.J. along with Mandy Arriota, who is with MOPS. And we want to make sure you know about that on March 10th and 11th. We will link to those in the show notes so that you can find those. And be sure and find J.J. on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all the places. She's got all kinds of great inspiration for your day. Coming up next week, I'm super excited about my guest, but before I give you the tease on that, I want to remind you to send out a big thank you to Donna Tody, who is our producer, and Rebecca Beckett. She is our content coordinator. I want to connect with you too on all the social medias, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Julie Lyles Carr. Would love to see you on the socials. And be sure and check out AllMomDoes. We've got a phenomenal blog for you and also places on the socials that'll keep you inspired, give you great information, give you encouragement in this mom journey. Okay, next week on the Modern Motherhood Podcast, he has developed a movie that you're gonna love. It's about, I Can Only Imagine, the story behind the song that became the best known, most played Christian song of all time. We're going to be interviewing film director, writer, producer John Irwin, and he's going to let us in on all the gorgeous backstory to his newest film, I Can Only Imagine. That's next week on our next episode of the Modern Motherhood Podcast.